Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice, a publishing division of the Association of College and Research Libraries. This four-part series is brought to you with support from SAGE. These days, we find ourselves in a perfect storm of growing mistrust in science and a proliferation of misinformation. As we get past our incredulousness at this state of affairs, some of us are realizing that we need to turn the spotlight on the specialists who create, investigate, collect, and protect established scientific information. SAGE and Sense About Science, an organization that promotes the importance of science and scientific evidence to the general public, have released a report that pulls together those very same stakeholders, publishers, journalists, and librarians, to highlight the important roles these information curators play in today's information ecosystem. Joining the program to discuss the report called The People's Case for Curators and the Critical Importance of Curating Scientific Information for the Public Good are Tracy Brown, the Director of Sense About Science, Louis Coiffé-Gunn, CEO of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, and Camille Gamboa, Associate Vice President of Corporate Communications at SAGE. In this third episode, Louis Coiffé-Gunn, CEO of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, joins the discussion, and we learn about his organization's mission, as well as the main obstacles that are hindering our ability to restore trust in science and scientific evidence. Okay, Camille and Louis, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hi.
Great to be here.
Great. So let's provide a little context and background with the public's trust in science. But before we do that, Louis, can you just tell us a little bit about the mission of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals? And where do you see CILIP's mission aligning with building public trust in science?
It's a good question, very timely. We're just about to launch our new 5-year strategy, and that involved a lot of consultation with members and non-members and other stakeholders. And that included a bit of an update to our mission, not a radical one, but a little bit of an update. So our mission, we think of that as our purpose, is to inspire, inform, and empower people. And we achieve that at CILIP by visibly growing the positive impact of the whole information profession.
Excellent. So then moving on to sort of our main theme here, like how would you, both of you are welcome to chime in here, but how would you both describe public trust in science right now? I mean, what are some of the main obstacles against or that are hindering the restoration of trust in science? And Louis, we'll just start with you real quick.
Sure. I think it leads back to that mission. So if our members' kind of core impact on society includes informing and empowering people, then trustworthy science information has got to be key to that. And we at CILIP, we think we're quite uniquely able in our sector to connect, empower, and champion the whole information profession. So yes, that's those working in university library services, and that's our biggest segment of members. But it's also those who work in parliamentary libraries, across the civil service and government, schools, colleges, public libraries, you name it. So a very kind of holistic view at this issue. And in terms of the obstacles that are causing problems right now, so even here in the UK, the current US administration is causing issues, editing and altering data, altering the kind of ecosystem and the pipeline of academic research. And some of that just feels like straight up censorship to many, never mind kind of the more overt attacks on libraries and universities. But we are seeing impacts here in the UK. So we put out a statement and have a live open survey called Call of Members. And we know, for example, colleagues in NHS libraries, so people working across all the health library knowledge and information services, they're having to stop using services like PubMed, or they're having to use other alternative services. And likewise, colleagues working in academic research libraries over here in the UK are having to change their practice and adapt to kind of altering and editing of data. You've then got challenges around sustainable business models, rising costs, falling budgets for most institutions. And then open access was probably already entering a bit of a period of uncertainty, and then came AI.
Exactly. lots to deal with. Louis, I'm wondering if if CILIP is sort of tailoring or changing some of its communication with its membership and community specifically to address these problems. Are there examples that you can share in that regard?
Yeah, so we when we think about censorship, generally we use a phrase called intellectual freedom, which I think
Mm,
the American Library Association and others use. Comes from kind of UN and international like IFLA concept. So the
right.
one that everyone talks about the most is free speech, and that's the one you hear about the most in the press. But we think about intellectual freedom as a more kind of holistic concept that includes free speech, but also freedom to write, freedom to publish, freedom to think, basically. And part of that is about access to a range of trustworthy, peer-reviewed research and other types of resources so that people can make their own minds up. So I think that's when I talk about our profession empowering people, we don't tell people, we empower them, we give them access to information, and we help them to develop the skills to make best use of that information. So different types of literacy, et cetera, et cetera. So with some of the threats that I've already listed, I think we've just been trying to make sure the services we provide to our members and the wider sector help people to start with their ethical principles, which include information literacy, things like intellectual freedom, uh, privacy, things like that. Starting with those ethical values at the start, but then making sure people have the skills, experience, support across whatever sector they work in to uphold and champion those issues. So it might be a university librarian trying to support an academic, or it might be a school librarian helping a young person from a underrepresented background kind of find themselves in what's available to them. But it's a very broad, flexible set of ethical values that underpins our profession here. CILIP in
Mhm.
the UK, and I know similarly in the American Library Association and elsewhere.
Right, exactly. Camille, anything you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to zoom out a little bit
Great.
to your question with regard to public trust in science. If you actually look at the data, there's some really interesting data on this. So it won't be surprising for you to learn that public trust in science took a dip with COVID, with all the contradicting, changing, in some cases just outright false information that was
Yeah.
going around. But survey data from 2024 and that came out early this year was showing that public trust in science was going up. So it was looking promising. And so when we decided to partner with Sense About Science on the report that we've talked about earlier, it was with the hope that we could accelerate this kind of promising trend. But then, of course, Louis kind of talked about this too. But since 2025, we've got these challenges to public trust in science that are new. AI is causing everyone to question what information is real at all, scientific information included. And then, at least in the US, we are seeing some real attempts to use science for political gain. And so that, I'm sure, is having an impact as well. And we don't have data yet to show on that, but I'm assuming when we do, we'll see something really interesting. And then to make matters worse, there was a recent Pew survey that came out last month on public trust and more kind of like public confidence in U.S. higher ed, which is adjacent to science, and showing that it was decreasing as well, unfortunately. But there is some hopeful news that from that survey that found that part of the reason why the public mistrusts science that the public mistrusts higher education more generally is because they don't see it building student critical thinking or problem solving or exposing students to a variety of viewpoints. Well, what our guide shows with Sense About Science is that our curators, our science curators, our public information curators, public good curators are doing just that. They are actually engaging in these roles that the public find so valuable. They're not just getting the public to good information, but helping to build skills for life amongst the public. Through our interviews with curators, we found that they take their role of not telling people what to think, but how to think very seriously. So our hope is that our guide will be used to help turn curators from quiet custodians of knowledge to championed advocates for the standards that make science reliable. We hope it is, used in a way that we hope it's accessible and usable enough that it will be a helpful tool. And one more thing on this, from the Pew survey, that is actually a bright spot. So 70% of those surveyed indicated concerns with higher ed, as I mentioned before, but a majority of respondents, still 55%, rated higher ed as either excellent, very good, or good at advancing research and innovation. So when you kind of meld the worlds of higher ed and science, actually, we have this really good foundation from which we can continue to build trust in science. So it's a good spot for us to be in that way. And we hope that the guide will help with that moving forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Camille, because I was going to ask, I forget how you put it, but you mentioned sort of the quiet curators turning into sort of more vocal curators. Because a lot of these values and ethical values that Louis brought up and that you've just talked about, Camille, have been there all along, right? So, like,
Right.
information professionals and librarians have always been all about, freedom of information and, information literacy, and just curious, like, the sort of what's going on in our world now. What is causing this community of people to sort of now need to step up in a different way and, I guess, be more public about what they do, I guess, and sort of their more intentional promotion of those qualities, I suppose.
Shall I have a go at answering that?
Absolutely.
Sure. So the reason our new strategy is called Empowering Impact is that focus on impact. So
Mhm.
as you've said, the profession has a long history of doing a lot of this work, but often isn't always recognized for it.
Right.
And some of that is on society and others, but some of that is on the profession and organizations like SILIP that support it. So I think we really need to demonstrate that visible positive impact. So got to not only walk the walk, we need to keep updating our skills, keep updating our knowledge, keep helping our different service users, but we need to back that up with evidence, and we need to be able to talk about it and talk about that visible impact, because it's a crowded space. People are busy, money is tight. Um, often people will use services that have been produced by this profession and they won't even realize it. They might log onto their intranet and use a search box to find an academic journal, or they might walk into a space and not realize that all the expertise and effort and money that went into creating kind of seamless services, whether it's online or physical. So I think the profession, the library knowledge and information profession, is at a point where it really needs to be better at telling its story and having very impactful stats that back that up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that credit giving that Louis talks about is super helpful and important. And also just, Louis mentioned before, the academic freedom piece. And I think that there's probably a misnomer that, people in higher ed, and people in higher ed and science, including the curators we talked about in the report, including librarians, are just, indoctrinating students with one line of thinking. Well, another reason why we need to spread the word about what they do is actually, it's getting them to think critically for themselves,
Mm.
and using, the right standards that, that will best serve society, not telling them what to think.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think part of it is, like, we never really thought we'd be in this position, right? So that, like, that people would have to actually say, hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing, and this is what we've been doing all
Yeah.
along. Um, but times have changed, and now we have to kind of make it more obvious to the greater public. Um, but Louis, I liked what you said about impact, because I think we're seeing research impact as an important strategic initiative institution wide. Like, the institution wants to show that, um, the research happening there is having an impact, and there are results as from the research that they're doing. And so librarians and information professionals taking that same kind of strategic direction aligns seemingly really well with what the institutional area wants to do.
It does, but I think what's often missing is the kind of distinct contribution of the library service. So the university sector on both sides of the Atlantic and elsewhere is getting better at talking about its impact. So yes, that's economic impact and gross value added to the economy and growth, and all of that's really good. And then there's all the social impacts around learning and teaching, research, knowledge exchange. But it's very hard to draw out what the impact of the library service within a university is. Partly that's a sign of success because they're so integrated into those three missions that universities have. But again, I think as a profession, we need to be better at kind of visibly demonstrating that positive impact, and also working with partners, better. And I think that includes publishers and aggregators and other suppliers. It also includes academics and students and local people in the community. I'm particularly interested in how, in a particular local area, geographic area within one city, all the different library and information professionals can work together more. So around each university, you've got a bunch of public libraries, school libraries, colleges, universities, prisons, health services. They've all got library services, but they're often kind of dancing to a different tune within government. So I'm really interested in a kind of city-wide or local area. How do you get those different services to help each other and talk to each other to benefit their users?
Oh, that's great. I love that, Louis. Camille, I'm wondering, Louis mentioned sort of partnering or working more closely with publishers. I'm wondering if Sage is, doing some intentional work there as well from that side of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this research impact specifically, which you spoke on, there's a lot that we're doing to help kind of show the value of the research that we produce, which we hope in the end will also increase public trust in science. And I think the biggest and most one of the more recent examples from Sage is the Sage Policy Profiles, which I hope everyone has tried out or used because it's free. It's a tool from Sage that allows researchers to often for the first time discover where their work is cited in policy, and then importantly, share what they find with the world. There's like visualization tools and this personalized dashboard board that they can show just to help show, in how, and in accordance with their university's missions and values, how their research is doing good in the world. So yeah, that's a big area for us.
You just heard from Louis Coiffé-Gunn, CEO of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, and Camille Gamboa, Associate Vice President of Corporate Communications at Sage. Join us next week as we spotlight the role information professionals play in public good curation, including how they're uniquely positioned for addressing the cultural issue of trust in science, and how we can help them amplify this message. This 4-part series is brought to you with support from Sage. The Authority File podcast is brought to you every week by Choice and produced by digital media producer Sabrina Kofer. Underwriting opportunities are directed by Melissa Carr and Ryan King. For more information, download the Choice Media Kit at choice360.org. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.